worth more than being wage slaves or cannon fodder. Wouldn't you agree? Like I've said numerous times, we have the technological and resource capability to feed, clothe, educate and provide for every human being on this planet. Yeah, that's right, all 7 billion of us. Does the notion of slapping a price tag on that sound just as asinine to you as it does to me? But I tell you what, that's enough of my ranting for now. Otherwise this podcast will be several hours long. So on that note, we shall not so much dwell on the past and instead look to the future. So some of you may be asking, what sorts of things do I see in store for us during the year 2012? Well, to be completely honest, if I may, if I can just answer it in a roundabout fashion, I must admit that I'm deeply honoured to be alive right now. When I first saw Zeitgeist Addendum, I felt anger to have been born into this point in time, because things have been allowed to get as bad as they have. However, now I don't feel that form of anger anymore. Instead, I feel hope and optimism, because I'm aware and understanding of what we can do about this mess we find ourselves in, and being a part of that critically required change in order to help humanity shift into a better world for ourselves, for future generations and all other forms of life on Earth is deeply humbling to me. The phrase that I referred to earlier of interesting times being actually a Chinese curse does apply, because the double-edged sword that the current economic climate has proven to be. It can coalesce into our ultimate destruction, or it can be the springboard to our ultimate salvation. As I'm not a prophet, I cannot tell with any certainty exactly when any kind of tipping point will occur, either for the better or worse. I do, however, see it happening in the near future. I think the hopeful part of me dwells on the, dare I say, esoteric predictions of 2012 being not a deadline for destruction, but a time of universal enlightenment and awakening. I truly and deeply hope that that is the case. Well, while I have no evidence to back it up, but that is why it remains a hope and not an assertion. I really sincerely hope that it's true what those certain cultures say, that 2012 is going to be the time of awakening, or as they call it, the grand revealing, where all the cards will be placed on the table. I do, however, try my best to keep myself in check and not get whisked away by overzealous romanticism, because awakening or no awakening, one thing is certain: unless we actually do something about the situation we're in right now, I'm actually afraid of the consequences. I've elaborated in previous podcasts what we can all do to prepare for collapse and pursue our own self-sufficiency. So on that point, if you're curious as to what I say about that, go check out the other podcasts. But so I guess this leads me on to the next logical point in this process, right? What do we actually do about this mess? Ultimately, that is for each of you to decide. However, I can offer a host of suggestions based upon my own experiences. For the last 2 years I've been an activist in conjunction with the Zeitgeist movement, but what does that term even mean? Well, TTM is not about signing up per se. It's a value set. If you agree in principle with the train of thought that we advocate, or even just that we need to change things fast and we need to move into a system that cares for society and actually frees us, then voila, you are a member of TZM. And the fact is that not all of you have to do the same things that I do. I don't ask anyone to do the things that I do. It's highly stressful. Or I don't ask people to do things that other people in the movement do. As Ben McLeish very rightly said in the first interview I did with him, there are different levels of people. Some of you will be geared towards megaphone activism, like I am. Some of you will be more geared towards simply having that value set in your mind and in your heart. Again, as Ben said, as a dormant passenger in your life. And, when the time comes, you'll be open to it. And, just because you're not, bleating on about it like people like I do, you're not harming the progression of the movement, if you see what I mean. It's all about your own individual stances of things, I suppose. I mean, your own personal orientation will determine how you assimilate and hopefully communicate this message out to your fellow human being, because I have to admit that the only way we will reach the critical mass that we're striving for is to communicate this value set, but not only that, but do as much as we can to embody that. Now, I do understand that it's incredibly difficult to think about that, let alone implement that in our current system, because we're expected and demanded to act in the exact opposite manner. It's hard to consider self-interest as social interest if you work in retail, for example, like I do. And if you infuse a value set akin to that of an RBE in your everyday business, then it will drive you out of business. It's the principles of capitalism are diametrically opposed to what we're advocating here. Believe me, I understand how difficult it is, and as such, that's why being in this position of advocating a new social and economic model which actually cares for life as a whole is a complete paradox. It's one of the reasons why myself and many others are accused of not having jobs and demanding get a job when we're out doing our activism, to which, what I say to that, I'm a thinker, sir or madam. That is my job. And why would you assume that I wouldn't have a job anyway? I understand how certain people would be inclined to say such things to us. Things such as, if you're so clever, how come you're not rich or got a great job? To which I reply, from what I've learned from the wonderful logic of Jacques Fresco, if you're so rich or got a great job, how come you're not clever? It's a fine line that we must all walk, not only to maintain our own integrity, but to maintain our sanity as well. This is an insane world that we live in, a deeply mentally ill value and economic system. And in order to maintain our own sense of humility, altruism and progressiveness, I guess we have to be a little, dare I say, insane by the orthodox standards of behaviour and values. However, with that said, I will never forget the words of Jiddu Krishnamurti when he said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." And he's absolutely right. Our society is pathologically sick, and we need to undergo treatment, a form of social therapy, as it were, but not a treatment that only attacks the symptoms of our psychological and value-oriented aberrancies, but a treatment that attacks and solves the very disease itself. And it's hard to say that what that may be in regards of the individual. However, one thing I can say with certainty is that, as a whole, the very values and behaviours we hold right now, and as a consequence, the system we've created and vice versa, is the source of that aberrated function. So we need to seek our own ways of cleansing ourselves, of purifying our hearts and minds, and pushing for this change, being the change. As Gandhi said, we need to be the change we want to see in the world. But that won't happen if we don't recognise how the current system cannot, will not, and will never allow that to happen. It can't. If it could, or did, then the entire house of cards will come crashing down, and we wouldn't be ready for it. We have to want this change because we recognise that we need this change. And when we cross that threshold, well, there's no telling what we can do. But anyway, I think we've more or less come to the end of this particular podcast show, running out of time. I only have one more thing left to say, but before that I'll state that next time I will hopefully be having Ben McLeish return to the show once again. This time we'll be making the second step to the interview I did with him before, called What Comprises the Current Zeitgeist. The next one will be called What Comprises the RBE Zeitgeist. So I'll be looking forward to that, and hope you guys will too. Besides that, I just want to thank you all for listening to AAU TZM podcasts. It's certainly been an interesting year, and I endeavour to bring you better and better shows in the future. I mean, one thing I will hopefully be doing is interviewing not only people in the movement, but also people outside the movement to discuss TZM and an RBE if they wish, or just informally have a chilled out chinwag about socially conscious issues. I'm currently in talks with some of my friends who aren't actually in the movement, but are nonetheless open-minded and switched on, as it were, to come on and have a discussion. So I'm definitely looking forward to bringing those to you. So yeah, I guess that's another thing 2012 will bring, much more diverse podcasts from me. But anyway, on to my closing part here. I thought I should end this podcast with a poem. This particular poem is by a much nonetheless underrated but extremely talented actor and also thinker by the name of Woody Harrelson. And no, my likeness to him is not the motivation for me reading one of his poems. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this particular poem couldn't be any more apt than what we're experiencing in our lives right now. If I could be so bold, I'd like to ask you all right now, if you're able, to sit back and listen as I read through this and contemplate how this applies to you, to your life and what you want from life, and see whether or not Woody was actually right about this. The poem in question is called Thoughts from Within, and it goes like so. Sometimes I feel like an alien creature for which there is no earthly explanation. Sure, I have human form, walking erect, opposing digits, but my mind is upside down. I feel like a run-on sentence in a punctuation crazy world, and I see the world around me like a mad collective dream. An endless stream of people move like ants on the freeway, cell phones, PCs and digital displays. In money we trust, we'll find happiness, the prevailing attitude. Like a genetically modified irradiated Big Mac that's somehow symbolic of food. Morality is legislated, prisons overpopulated, religion is incorporated, the profit motive has permeated all activity. We pay our government to let us park on the street, and war is the biggest money maker of all. We all know missile envy only comes from being small. Politicians and prostitutes are comfortable together. I wonder if they talk about the strange change in the weather. This government was founded by, of, and for the people, but everyone feels it like a giant open sore. They don't represent us anymore. And blaming the president for the country's woes is like yelling at a puppet for the way it sings. Who's the man behind the curtain pulling the strings? A billion people sitting watching their TV in the room that they call living. But for me, I see living as loving, and since there is no loving room, I sit on the grass under a tree, dreaming of the way things used to be, pre-industrial revolution, which of course is before the rivers and oceans and skies were polluted, before Parkinson's and mad cows and all the convoluted cacophony of bad ideas like skyscrapers and tree paper and earth rapers like Monsanto and DuPont had their way, as they continue to today. This was pre-us. Back when the buffalo roamed and the Indian's home was the forest and God was nature and heaven was here and now. Can you imagine clean water, food and air? Living in community with animals and people who care? Do you dare to feel responsible for every dollar you lay down? Are you going to make the rich man richer, or are you going to stand your ground? You say you want a revolution, a communal evolution, to be part of the solution? Maybe I'll be seeing you around. And with that said, I will say my goodbyes. You all take care. I love you all. Have a wonderful life.